No. Now it is. Is that better? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call this December 3rd, 2018 meeting to order. And first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Chris Coughlin, would you please lead us?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chris. I want to welcome everybody to this meeting, and the first order of business is a proclamation dealing with Arbor Day, which is still some months away, not until April, but this is the time we normally take care of the Arbor Day proclamation, and as I understand it, it is part of our Tree City, USA designation here in Whitefish. I'm also reminded that the best time to plant a tree was yesterday, and the next best time to plant a tree is today. So I encourage people when they have the opportunity to plant trees. Just a little bit of background. I got in trouble in junior high, and I was part of a detail to go out in the forest and dig up some trees and plant them in the schoolyard. Today, those are huge trees in the schoolyard of my junior high. So I planted a tree more than yesterday. So here it is. Whereas natural areas, trees and landscapes provide not only community beautification but also economic and environmental benefits, and whereas trees provide many benefits to the community, including air purification, wind breaks, noise reduction, shade, and energy savings, and whereas planting trees and maintaining older trees provides an opportunity for community interaction, volunteerism, economic development, and environmental conservation. And whereas our efforts to improve the environment benefit present and future generations, and whereas Arbor Day in Montana is officially the last Friday in April, be it therefore resolved, I, Richard S. Hildner, Deputy Mayor of Whitefish, Montana, do hereby proclaim Friday, April 26, 2019, as Arbor Day, and encourage citizens to participate in appropriate activities and take advantage of the benefits of the parks and other natural areas in our community. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Whitefish, Montana, to be affixed on December 3rd, 2018. So, there we are. The next order of business is communications from the, communications from the public. This is a time set aside for folks in the audience to step up and address the council on anything that is not the subject of a public hearing today. And we have 4 public hearings, excuse me. So if you have anything you'd like to say to the council, now is your time. And when you do approach the podium, please, if your last name is not Smith, would you spell it so that Michelle can get the spelling correct? Thanks. Anybody?
Even then it's tricky.
What's that?
Even then it's tricky.
It could be with a Y. Sorry. No, that was me.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, councilors and Deputy Mayor. Hi, Katie. Nice to see you. My name is Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer Avenue. The Arbor Day proclamation was so great, calling out all the benefits of trees. And I would love to see the city really become more active in a sort of a robust tree replacement program, because we have a lot of trees that are aging out or are diseased, and boy, we're good at cutting them down. But I would like to see replanting, a real strategy for making sure that we maintain our urban forest, and especially our leafy canopy, which is so valuable to us as enumerated in the proclamation, and really defines the character of our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. Anyone else wish to address the council?
I'm Toby Scott, that's S-C-O-T-T, and I just wanted to request that when the city council does take up the fireworks workshop, you let me know. I was here at 5 o'clock tonight, and it had been canceled because there's only 4 of you, and I guess that's not a quorum to be able to do anything about anything. But I previously have sent you a little list of recommendations, should you decide to enact some legislation against fireworks on the lake, other than the city fireworks. And I have a couple to add to that list.
Okay.
So that's all. Just let me know. Michelle's got my email and phone.
Okay. Yeah, let me just address one thing. Just so everybody knows, we do in fact have a quorum tonight, but just barely. It takes 4 for a quorum, so
I realized that after I said
that's quite all right. Yeah, I just wanted the public to understand. Yes, absolutely.
And we generally don't address public comment, but just since you're here, I can quickly tell you that it is scheduled for our work session on January 21st. So it has been moved, so it is. So under the manager's report, it is scheduled. And then I'm sure that Michelle or Adam can follow up if you have any questions. All right, thanks.
Anyone else wish to comment? All right, seeing none, communications from volunteer boards. Anybody in the public participating in a volunteer board that has a report? How about from council? Any volunteer board reports? Seeing none, we'll move right along to the consent agenda. I'll need a motion.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor Williams, seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Any comment, discussion? All those in favor? And it passes unanimously, Michelle. And that brings us on then quickly to the first of our public hearings. And this is consideration of a request from Steve Sutherland and Christine Coughlin for a conditional use permit to convert an existing area above a garage into a guest house located at 319 Haugen Heights, zoned WER, Estate Residential, and this is WCUP 18-11. Bailey.
Good evening. So the applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to convert an existing area above a garage into a guest house. There was a building permit that was issued for the single-family house and the attached garage in June of 2018, and it did include a second floor bonus area. Since the garage is a little over 700 square feet, it's too large to become an accessory apartment. So they're applying for a guest house instead. The structure does comply with all setback requirements in addition to the building height and lot coverage requirements. And as the Deputy Mayor said, the property is accessed from Haugen Heights, which at this location is a privately maintained road. So the subject property is approximately 0.907 acres in size. It's surrounded by residential uses on all sides. The majority of them are also WER. To the east is some WR2. The zoning is the WER, which is the Estate Residential District, and that does correspond to the growth policy designation, which is suburban residential as well. It will be connected to all city services. We did mail a notice to the adjacent landowners within 150 feet of the subject parcel on October 26th. We also emailed advisory agencies for comments and placed a notice of the hearing in the Whitefish pilot on October 31st. As of the planning board packet, I had 2 comments that were received in support of the proposal, and I haven't had any additional ones since that time. So just hitting the highlights of the criteria, the development is consistent with the purpose and intent of the regulations. It does meet the requirements for the guest house, our performance standards, and our zoning standards. The existing structure meets or exceeds all the setback requirements for the primary structure since it's attached to the main single-family house. As I said, it will be accessed from Haugen Heights, and the first 80 feet of the driveway is required to be paved under our code. And the property does comply with both the minimum lot size and lot width for the WER zoning. The zoning regulations do require 2 parking spaces for the single-family house. An additional 1 off-street space must be provided for the guest house. So the proposed lot does provide adequate space to accommodate these parking needs on-site within the parking spaces located within the garage and adjacent to the structure. The property is serviced by water and sewer off of Haugen Heights. Stormwater drainage was reviewed by the Public Works Department at the time the applicant submitted their building permit application for the residential house. As I mentioned before, Haugen Heights, directly adjacent to this property, is privately maintained, but further to the east, Haugen Heights is owned and maintained by the city of Whitefish. So even though it's privately maintained, it is still open to the public, so it is accessible to all the public. Traffic impacts are anticipated to be minimal. It does include a single-family residence. It's located within an existing neighborhood with similar uses. No additional noise or vibration is anticipated to be generated by the proposed use. Trying not to repeat myself. As I said, it does meet the primary structure setbacks as it's attached to the single-family dwelling. This allows for adequate open space within the subject property to maintain the character and scale of the surrounding neighborhood. The guest house is not detrimental to the immediate neighborhood as it reflects the housing standards established in that area and is used as an accessory use to the existing primary residence. So, staff recommended approval of the conditional use permit on dated November 8th, subject to 7 conditions that were attached to you. I did have one proposed change to condition number 6 that I made at the planning board hearing at the request of the applicant. And it just, in our standards, we allow that a guest house may be used as a rent charge for compensation for if they have somebody like a live-in nurse or a some other domestic worker that they want to trade rent for compensation. So that is allowed. So I just reworded that standard so it matched what is actually in our zoning regulations. So that proposed language change is on the front of my transmittal letter. The planning board met on November 15th and considered the request. There were no public that spoke at that meeting. I did attach those draft minutes for the item in your packet. And following the hearing, the planning board did vote unanimously to recommend approval of the application. And I'm sure the applicants would talk if you have questions as well, or I'm happy to answer questions if you have any.
Thank you, Bailey. Any questions from council for Bailey? Okay. All right. We'll hear from the applicant if they would like to speak. Yeah, let the record show. The applicant does not wish to speak. How about any members of the public wish to address WCUP 18-11? Not seeing anyone. I'm going to turn it back to council for comment and or a motion.
I will make a motion to approve WCUP-1811 with findings of facts and as conditioned in the packet.
I will second.
And as adjusted in condition number 6.
Correct.
Yes.
Presented.
Any discussion? Oh, you got a second? Any discussion? No discussion. All those in favor? And no one is opposed. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. Feel free to stick around if you'd like. Thanks, Chris. All right, that brings us to item B, public hearing, consideration of a request from Bill Goldberg for a conditional use permit to build a new commercial mixed-use building with a footprint of 8,205 square feet, which includes proposed 14 dwelling units, and I'm going to come back to that momentarily, but that's the way it is in the agenda. Units at 334 Central Avenue, zoned to WB3, and this will be WCUP 18-10.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and councilors. So yeah, this is a proposal for a conditional use permit for a mixed-use building with ground level retail commercial and a footprint that's greater than 7,500 square feet and more than 4 residential units. Both of those things, the over 7,500 square feet of a footprint and the more than 4 dwelling units, require a conditional use permit in the Old Town Central District, which is where this building is located. On the floor plan, it does show 2 residential units on the ground floor of the 14 that are proposed. There is something in the WB3 zoning code which only allows dwelling uses on floors other than the ground floor. So we're recommending a condition that there'd be no dwelling units allowed on the ground floor. So that would reduce it to 12 dwelling units unless they can reconfigure the upstairs units. As far as the growth policy designation of this particular area, it's core commercial, which corresponds primarily to the WB3 zoning district. The major uses in that area are retail, commercial, professional, and government offices, financial institutions, restaurants, taverns, hotels, art galleries, and studios. It's characterized by mixed and multi-use developments, such as residential above retail, mixed residential and office, and artist lofts, which may have residential, studio, and gallery components. Urban forums are dense and usually multi-level. Street connectivity is high with minimal or zero setbacks and accessible human-scale storefronts. Character is pedestrian. On-street parking is provided for accessibility. Parking serving employees and residents is generally located in parking structures or small lots accessed from alleys. Streets are active. Streetscapes are attractive with street trees, planters, and street furniture. Architecture is of very high quality and contributes to the established local theme. So that's kind of the overview of the growth policy. On this particular project, we did mail public notice to all the property owners within 150 feet of the development. We received 0 comments on the project. Just today there was one email letter from Chris Schustrom of Heart of Whitefish, which I believe you guys all received. That's the only other comment that we have received in writing. For a conditional use permit, we do look at 1178J of the Whitefish zoning regulations for our review to create findings. The first finding is growth policy compliance. Again, that's the commercial core, which I just summarized for you. One of those goals in the growth policy is to strengthen the role of downtown Whitefish as the commercial, financial, administrative center of the community. And another goal is to protect and preserve the special character, scale, and qualities of the existing neighborhoods while supporting and encourage attractive, well-designed, neighborhood-compatible infill development. And so this particular 3-story proposed building would be replacing an existing 2-story older building as an infill development. That existing building will be, according to the applicants, be moved off-site, so it won't be torn down, but it'll be recycled to another location. The downtown master plan and our policy 3 and the growth policy states that the city of Whitefish shall continue to implement and update the downtown Whitefish business district master plan. So that's another element of our growth policy that we look to within that downtown master plan, which is an amendment to the growth policy. It states that Central Avenue is Whitefish's primary retail street and notes that demand for more retail space on Central Avenue can be met by expanding retail south of 3rd Street down to 4th Street. And it defines retail as establishments that offer the sale of goods such as clothing, shoes, groceries, and food and drink, restaurants, cafes, bars. And then as far as the guiding principles are relevant to this project, extending Central Avenue streetscape between Railway and 3rd south to 4th, foster resident serving retail uses for Central Avenue south of 3rd, storefront retail as desired along Central Avenue to 4th Street, and the shopping loop emphasis streets, which includes Central to 4th, should be pedestrian-oriented and expand retail offerings. So with that encouragement of a mixed uses along Central Avenue south of 3rd, the downtown master plan does call for a redevelopment along that area into more traditional types of commercial similar to the rest of Central Avenue between 1st and 3rd Street, which this proposal is consistent with. It also states that upper floor uses for ground floor retail should be are indicated as commercial or multifamily residential, including condominiums. And then the standards are street-oriented with continuous edge-to-edge retail uses along street frontages, uninterrupted by parking or other disruptions, and then foster 18-hour uses, promote an animated atmosphere by including transparent ground floor windows. It also says ground floor blank walls should be prohibited in new construction. And front doors to retail uses should be required to face the street or be street-oriented. So they are proposing pedestrian-friendly retail spaces along Central Avenue with multifamily residential at the rear of the ground floor, as I mentioned, which we're adding a condition that would not be ground floor residential, but the upper stories would be residential. And then on their plan, they do show commercial uses towards the back of the ground floor. That is permitted according to the zoning. However, the rest of Central Avenue between 3rd and Railway, there is a provision that such uses must be cover no more than 30% of the ground floor and not be visible from Central Avenue nor located within the retail storefront area. As far as the edge-to-edge retail, this building is proposed to be set back a little bit off the side yard lot lines, about a little over 4 feet on each side, and then 1 foot in the front and 2 feet in the rear. Some of the reasons for the side yard setbacks, there is an ADA access ramp to provide ADA access on one side that needs to be accommodated within that setback. There's a fire exit and stairwell that's in there. Also, our building code would require, if it was built on the property line, that there wouldn't be any windows on those sides, and so you'd see a blank wall on there, and I believe that one of the reasons they're setting it back is to provide some articulation to the architecture of the sides of those buildings and also allow some windows along the ground floor on the sides for the retail and commercial spaces, as well as upstairs for the residential units. And so I think some of that the edge-to-edge retail or edge-to-edge building design is for when there is existing buildings built lot line to lot line, then those would fit in with there. In this situation, there's 2 existing buildings on either side of them that may not be redeveloped for some time. And so if it was built edge to edge, we would see big, large blank walls on either side of the building until those other buildings were redeveloped to also be built up to that. So keep that in mind when looking at that. So the findings we have is that the proposed use complies with the growth policy designation of commercial core because it's zone B3, and the proposed use is consistent with the conditional uses in the B3 zone. It also conforms to some of the goals of the land use element chapter of the growth policy. They do contribute to the strength of downtown as a commercial center of the community. The building mass and height or scale is consistent with adjacent structures along Central Avenue. As far as the downtown master plan, it does offer pedestrian-friendly retail spaces fronting Central Avenue as infill, extends that retail core and pedestrian loop up to 4th Street, and it's a consistent character with other structures on Central Avenue. One of the other requirements is compliance with the zoning regulations. Underlying zoning is B3, as I mentioned. The uses are consistent with the B3. One of the things they are providing, WB3 is exempt from parking requirements. This proposal has an underground parking garage that will include 20 underground parking spaces. Their particular uses would only require 12, so they're exceeding the requirement for off-street parking. The upper story residential uses would require 1 per unit. Zoning permits a maximum building height of 45 feet with no more than 3 stories. With the plans that were submitted, the standards appear to be met, and of course will be confirmed at the time of building permit when we'll review all the dimensions of the final drawings. So in that sense, under finding 3, the project does comply with the zoning regulations. The zoning standards are being met or will be met with conditions of approval or reviewed at the time of building permit. Site suitability. There is adequate land area. It's 0.26 acres on the site. The access meets the standards and the regulations. There's public sidewalk along the street for pedestrian access. There's no environmental constraints. It's not in the floodplain. Again, I mentioned the parking. There's no open space requirement, no fencing or screening, any landscaping along the perimeter of the building. Obviously, will meet our requirements. Signage will have to be permitted once businesses go into that building. As far as public services, they all are available. That street was recently reconstructed, and so any new development there will connect to water and sewer along that new street. Traffic generation, there was no impact study required. Based on the use, there will be some traffic generated both foot and vehicle. However, any of the employees or residents of the property would be able to park off-street on those 20 parking spaces they're providing. far as neighborhood community compatibility, downtown Whitefish is a home to a variety of restaurants, bars, hotels, retail uses, civic centers. The proposed uses are consistent with the downtown area. Structural bulk and massing and scale, obviously with a footprint of 7,500 square feet. That's something that we look at. The way the building is designed, it does fit in with other buildings in the neighborhood. It will obviously have to go to the Architectural Review Committee for final approval of the design, so that is subject to change somewhat as it goes through that process. Density, again, this project will add at least 12 new residential units, and again, the off-street parking was provided. As far as community character goes, again, we mentioned the downtown master plan, looking to extend that storefront style of Central Avenue down to 4th Street. There's some new buildings being constructed across the street that extend that with retail and commercial uses and residential uses, and this building will be similar to that. So with all that, staff did go through the findings and found that they do, the project is consistent with findings for approval. We did have 9 conditions that we wanted to place on that. Obviously, the project must comply with the site plans and drawings, except as amended by the conditions. Any ground disturbing activities, they have to have a plan reviewed by planning department for dust abatement, construction activity, detours and whatnot during the construction. All on and offsite infrastructure plans must be submitted to the Public Works Department. All new utilities have to be installed underground. Refuge location needs to be reviewed and approved by Public Works and North Valley Refuse. Fire department requires all fire codes to be met. It needs to be fully sprinklered, including a full alarm system. So that'll be a requirement when we review the building permits. As I mentioned, the Architectural Review Committee must sign off on that prior to a building permit. And then, as I mentioned, the special condition that first floor must be redesigned to address inconsistencies with the WP3 Old Town Central District by removing residential uses, and that the permit would be good for 18 months. So this went to the Whitefish City Planning Board last month. Staff had recommended approval. There was a public hearing. The applicant and the architect spoke. Also, Rhonda Fitzgerald from 412 Leffer spoke with concerns about the ground floor being offices and not all retail. Discussion about short-term rentals being a possibility in the condo units. And then she mentioned the concern about setbacks from the property lines. Again, the draft minutes are included. The planning board did review that, and after a vote, they recommended approval 4-2. And I'd be glad to answer any questions if you have any. And also, the applicant is here, and there was some talk about the possibility of, since there's only 4 counselors, they are amenable to potentially postponing any vote on this until the January meeting when there are more counselors available.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David at this point? I have a couple. What is the width of an ADA sidewalk?
Well, most sidewalks have a minimum of 4 feet. I think, I'm not sure what the exact ADA requirement is. I don't know if Aaron might know as an architect. It's a little rusty.
Yeah, it's a minimum of 36 inches versus 5 feet.
Yeah, hang on a second. I'll let you address that,
So,
Aaron.
36 inches, apparently.
Okay. Travis, from a fire standpoint, is there any consequence, benefit, or detriment if you have a 4-foot gap between one building and another in the downtown core?
Typically, they do that so there's a fire separation. In case the fire breaks out, it doesn't go from building to building to building. They don't allow windows to be put in there. There's special provisions that you can get fire-rated approved windows to put in walls like that, but typically they don't allow windows, from my experience. I'm not sure what the separation distance has to be to where they do allow windows.
Okay. Because I think when we built this building, we had to have a minimal separation between the two buildings, as I recall, and it was just a matter of inches. Is that correct? Does anybody know?
I don't know that.
That was my recollection. Okay. And finally, you said that in your recitation, David, that this proposal had to be consistent with adjacent structures. How do you define, or how do we define adjacent? It seems to me adjacent means next to.
I'm not sure what part you're referring to, maybe on the community character. I mean, one of the requirements is looking at how it fits in the context of an existing neighborhood. Obviously that area is being redeveloped. Our downtown master plan calls for an expansion of retail uses, a redevelopment. It calls for a major anchor to be put where that parking lot is. That's currently a city parking lot. And so knowing that that area is under redevelopment, I mean, it's hard to look at the context of maybe, the existing buildings that are there right now that at some point may be redeveloped, that are underdeveloped based on our downtown master plan, which calls for, the massive amounts of ground floor retail and mixed-use development to be expanded.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at page 16 of the downtown master plan where it says with existing desirable adjacent buildings, and my idea of adjacent means next to, not a block away.
On the downtown master plan, page 16,
Yes.
under land use framework.
Mm-hmm. Under land use character?
Yep. No, I see that, yeah.
Yeah.
Character with existing desirable adjacent buildings. So it says with existing desirable adjacent buildings, which is talking, again, in the
Then we
context.
have to define desirable.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of the context of that plan. I mean, the intent is that that area would redevelop and lot line to lot line. Those existing buildings that are there are not lot line to lot line, not even close to that. And so, I mean, I don't think that they're necessarily consistent with the vision for that. So the intent is that it would be more consistent with the desirable buildings or the type that are found on Central Avenue, north of 3rd Street.
Okay. I think that's it for now. Anybody else? No? All right, we did call for a public hearing on WCUP 18-10. Is the proponent, do you wish to address the council?
Hi, Aaron Wallace, 265 Hawks Lake Lane, Whitefish, Montana. I'm the principal architect for Montana Creative Architecture and Design and representing the owner in this project. Respectively, we'd like to table this project until the next meeting, just so that we have a little bit larger quorum for the public council, or from the council. It's a big project that I think that deserves the review of more of a little bit substantial numbers at this point. Is that possible?
That will require a decision from the council, whether or not to do that. But we would entertain it. But I would say that we did ask for and advertise for a public hearing, and I think the public, my opinion is the public deserves that. So, but I will turn that back to council if you wish to entertain that notion.
I would clearly entertain and make a motion to table this to the first meeting in January, leaving the public hearing open, obviously, until that time. And then if that's acceptable, I'm happy to do that. I think it would be, given the size of this project, I think it would be important that we have more councilors here to consider this.
I would second that motion.
I would make a couple of comments before we go forward with that. First of all, if we table, it becomes incumbent upon a majority of council to take it off of the table. So that would require a second vote. Secondly, postponement would be more in keeping rather than tabling.
Sure.
And it would be postponed to a date certain. I think, on the other hand, that we did ask and open the public hearing, and I think it's important that the public, when we advertise for a public hearing, and of course we're going to have to vote on this, that the public have their due and have their say in a public hearing. I also recognize that January 7th is going to be a very heavy, shall I say, agenda, and that this would just add additional burden to that agenda and anyone who wishes to comment on the next agenda items on the 7th. So I see that that is possibly going quite late. So,
Deputy Mayor, I would like to revise my motion to postpone this to a date certain of January 7th, leaving the public hearing open for this evening for those that are here that wish to comment, as well as continuing it to January 7th. And I recognize that it will create a congested agenda on January 7th. It won't be the first time.
Katie?
That's okay with the second. I agree.
Let me further clarify, if I can, and because I do want to honor the public that's here. I think that we should, my recommendation is that we hold the public hearing, and then at some point, then have a motion to continue the public hearing, if that's the council's desire, to the January 7th meeting, rather than postpone. If we made a motion to postpone now, we'd be postponed and the public would not have a chance to comment.
My intent, Richard, is to allow the continuation of the public hearing for those that are here and want to comment. I think that's important. We advertise for it. So I'm happy to have that. I want that to happen. I'm not suggesting that we not do that. So however you feel I need to couch my motion, I'm happy to do that.
I can withdraw the second. We can keep it open for public hearing, and then we can make a motion after public hearing. Is that what
That's what I would recommend, and I want to check in with Angela about this. And my idea is that if that's the desire of council, that we hold the public hearing and then have a motion to continue before we get to a motion to either approve or not approve. But when we get to that point, have a motion to continue.
Fine.
Is that acceptable? So that would require then, is that the modification of have I articulated the modification, and is that okay with the second?
Sounds great.
All right. Now, before we get to voting on that, could you weigh in, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's appropriate if you want to begin to hold the public hearing so people can speak, but I also think if a full council, or at least more than all four of you, are going to make a decision, that you need to continue to hold it open till the next
That's my
meeting.
intent.
Perfect. Then you're fine. Yeah.
And will we be provided with no-dose tablets on the 7th? Just
I will
kidding.
personally bring those. 'Cause I will need them.
So with that, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Okay, so to keep the record straight here, we'll continue with the public hearing. You'll have your opportunity. The public will have their opportunity to speak. Then, when no one else wishes to speak, we'll bring it back to council for a motion and/or a motion to continue, however we want to do it. But given your request to continue as opposed to table. Okay? Are we still okay and solid ground? All right.
That sounds great. Just one other,
that's
since
it.
we're on this topic, when we come back, will that be an open, again, public comment at that point?
It will be, yes.
Okay. And again, just so we're kind of clear, Dave will probably not represent his findings at that point. They'll be required to review the meeting minutes, and then we'll be able to open up any other open discussion at that point, correct? Is that what it seems? I just want to kind of make sure.
This will be, again, I may need a little help here, but you'll have your opportunity tonight as the proponent to make your presentation. And then I think it's going to be up to the chair on the 6th whether or not to have the proponent continue or have another bite at this apple. It seems to me you only get one.
Well, generally, they get rebuttal as well.
Okay, so you'd have a rebuttal, but you wouldn't have a chance for a new presentation. The presentation you make tonight is your presentation.
Is the presentation, and then so we can hold any rebuttal until the following one.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Just
Is everybody, I want to make sure everybody follows
yeah,
along
no,
with this
that's
because,
exactly. I just want to make sure.
Because this is, I think, one of the more important decisions we'll make for our downtown.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to make sure that we do it as openly and publicly as possible.
Yep, and that's why I'm requesting to do that. So, okay. Let me regroup here. So, a couple of quick questions that just related to the building staff questions that you had, Richard, that I'm going to address, and I'll jump into the presentation of the project since it's in my architecture mind right now. A couple of key things. Yes, we've had to, because of the height and grades of the elements of the building, we are promoting putting garage access underneath the building and off of the alleyway. Due to the slopes and the heights and the elevation changes between the alleyway and Central Avenue, we have a 1 to 2, about 18-inch height difference where the sidewalk will meet to where the first floor of the building is, just because of the heights of providing an 8-9 foot ceiling down below. Because of that, we are then wrapping our ADA access around off of the south side there. And a ramp to bring up to a secondary entrance. This helps with egress and other elements. Because we do have a 5-foot turning radius, in fact larger because it's in a smaller dugout patio space, we're able to do that with meeting all building code requirements. So there shouldn't be any issue there. Some of the fire-related questions, per the IBC 2012 building code, you can have 15% of your wall face openings, such as windows or doors, if you're between 3 to 5 feet. Once you're at 5 feet or above, you can have up to 25% of that. Those are unprotected window openings if you sprinkle your building, which we will be doing. Secondary, these walls are all fire rated. If you have a mercantile or retail space, as the first floor will be planned out to be as a worst case scenario, you have a 2-hour fire rating if you're within 3 to 5 feet. Secondary, once you have a residential unit, you are a 1-hour fire rating. So these are the same sort of types and requirements that we all meet to the IBC's current standards. The building will be all code compliant in all these aspects. But you need to pull the building off 3 feet as a minimum to get windows in there, and 5 feet allows you a little bit more. So those are kind of the code requirements that we're related to there. The 5-foot access is typically a minimum to allow egress back and forth off of those sides. So that's the other reason why we're pulling off 5 feet. Excuse me. So in the building itself, yes, go ahead.
I thought it was 4. Was it 5?
5. Okay. Anything between 3 to 5. So there's a certain limit. Anything over 5 to 10 is another, right. 10 and so forth. So as you kind of move along.
But
So, okay. So yeah, but those are all kind of reviewed by us in the building department as part of this process and project. So it's not atypical in anything what we're proposing here to do. So, and there's other fun sort of rules that we get to play by. So in the building itself, what we're proposing on doing is an underground parking garage of about 20 spots down there with some storage units, and then the elevator access down to that first floor. The first floor, as per our original plan, had a couple of retail spaces in the front, then a retail, we called it commercial, but really it's a commercial retail mix of who wants to be able to use it. This is a unique block in this area where you're allowed to have commercial uses, not specifically retail, on the third block. And as such, just because we want a nice full building, we're allowing people, if they are a commercial use, such as an office space or any sort of using that building, as well as retail. If it all gets filled up with retail, that's great. At this time, we're kind of planning on smaller retail spaces. We're finding that those spaces at 500 to 1,000 square feet are more desirable than the larger units, which often kind of take a lot more cost to get into those type of spaces. So the smaller units become more desirable, and that's why we've kind of broken up the units as we have. We don't have any issue at all removing the 2 residential off the backside. That was our discussion that we had back and forth with Dave, and we're willing to sit there and go with that recommendation of not having any residential on that first floor. The second and third floor units are all are condo type units. I know there's been a lot of discussion on, owners and VRBO and type units. Yes, they're allowed to anticipate our VRBO. There's no condition saying that they have to or not have to. They're just condos for people able to buy. What we find is that at times people will buy them and not want to rent them out, and others will certainly allow that zoning use. From us, from a standpoint, and this is a benefit to Whitefish, usually we are a resort town. This is right downtown. We see a higher typical turnover when it's more of a VRBO type setting. This usually benefits the different retailers and also restaurant areas in downtown with a higher turnover usage. So we would anticipate that a more vibrant building is having these residences being able to be used as zoning allows. So either as a primary use or as a rental type unit per zoning. On the top, we have a series of decks and patios. One of the things that we're trying to do is create a vibrant street edge activity on the balconies and things like that. It's called out in the architectural review and other master planning guides to try to create some activity on the street fronts and the edges. So we do that off of the second floor in different series of balcony settings. Also up on the top floor, the third floor, we have some larger balconies towards the street front on the back side. And then there's a rooftop patio. This patio provides some access, a stairway access up to the roof for the fire department, which they certainly like, and a small viewing area space. It's under 500-600 square feet of space. For people find it very desirable, just like anybody else, to get up high and be able to see the views and things like that. This will be restricted because we don't have elevator access just to the residences themselves. The commercial uses, because they don't have an elevator, can't get up there and use that. We have shown kind of a building that is kind of has some wood or metal siding. In discussions with a contractor, we're hoping to kind of upgrade the finishes and looking at a brick building. So again, something that gives a little more permanence and mass to the feel, the character of the building in that area. So of course that will have to go through architecture review guidelines, and in the process we don't they saw it informally when we're presenting a different project across the street, and they all felt that it was a nice looking building at this point for the concept where it was at. Certainly we'll take that a lot farther as we move forward. One of the questions that came up at the lab planning board meeting was environmental aspects related to this building. And I think we can take a look at this and say it's fairly typical of what we do, but a lot of the projects we're involved in are very eco-friendly in a lot of different ways. I've got a little list here. I'm sorry, it's on my phone. So I'm just going to kind of tell you. So a few things that we kind of do is that we often use a very high insulation value, creating a very thermally efficient building. We use high quality windows and doors, creating a very good efficient building. We use many local source materials, as many as possible. So all of our lumber and everything else like that, and a lot of the finished materials and everything that we can get sourced local here, we try to do, which reduces the amount of shipping aspects of it. We use very high energy efficient light bulbs, high efficiency energy heating and cooling units. We use a lot of non-toxic lead-free paints and wood preservatives. We use low-flow fixtures, promoting water savings. And then in the aspect of this project itself, its location, we are relocating the existing building instead of putting it into the landfill. This building is located centrally downtown, which promotes healthy lifestyles of walking to different things such as schools, downtown restaurants, city services, and those type of parks and facilities versus using the car. And our building, also because of us being able to pull it back from the side or from the streets or the property lines, gets windows and natural light on on all sides of the building versus just two ends. And then we did have, the contractor went down to Flathead Electric to take a look at putting solar on the top of the roof here. The cost of the panels aren't a lot, but the payback is about 29 years. So at this point, what we're planning on doing is running conduit and the backup infrastructure to the top of the roof, so that if anybody that buys any of these units wants to put up solar themselves, they'd certainly be able to do it, or at any time that the solar panels become more economically efficient and reasonable, they'd be able to certainly go ahead and do that. So hopefully we put a nice high-quality building out here that meets all building code standards and review, and should last quite a long time. I think that's pretty much it I have there for the presentation of the building. If you have guys any questions related to it, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anybody have a question for Aaron at this point?
Aaron, I understand you're leaving your options open.
Your microphone, Frank, sorry.
One of my concerns is the lack of dedication, well, I'll call it, of the first floor to retail as opposed to commercial. I mean, the amount of retail that's being at least identified in your plans is minuscule. I mean, it's like nothing. It's less than a third of the building, the first floor, the way I'm looking at this thing. One of the important things in our downtown master plan is that we have more retail downtown, particularly on the street edge. Have you guys thought through the possibility of dedicating more of the first floor to retail only?
I don't think there's any dedication that we've really thought in that manner. We know we're not allowed residential at this point. Right. Commercial and retail are allowed in this zone and on this block. Our hope is, and our plan is, to have as much retail in there as possible. That's where we've seen the interest in those type of spaces. I know that the builder has talked to several different possible groups of using these different spaces of all different types. We've seen a lot of activity across the street, and most of those are anticipated with those of being retail spaces on the first floor. But there is also some commercial uses on the second floor and other spaces. So the biggest thing, I think, is that we designed the build and anticipated that no matter what we put in there initially, they have the ability and right to kind of move, and they do change quite a bit in those type of spaces, especially the smaller ones. What we've seen that we want to have a vibrant street front and people using the building, and the smaller spaces, regardless of use, is usually the ones that get filled up better versus the larger retail spaces. So at this point, they're all designed to a worst case scenario, which in designing per code, which is retail or mercantile. Those will all be having 2-hour ratings versus business, which is 1-hour rating. So it's set up for retail spaces to be certainly going in there. It's more of a labeling exercise at this point than, and unless the zoning changes aspect of it, that we're not allowed to put a commercial space in there, I guess. So.
Any other questions for Aaron? Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
First of all, in terms of solar, it just happened that my electric bill arrived today. Yes. From Flathead Electric, and I already have bought one solar panel when they first, for their solar farm down there. The new solar panels, actually the price of them has gone down for individuals to buy them. They're now $750 a piece. That gave us a 30 kilowatt credit for our bill, and the current payback, I did a quick calculation, I'm not a mathematician, but was not 29 years, but 20 years. I realize that's
Great.
Still a long period of time, but it gives you an opportunity to have people who buy these units, if not to put solar panels on your building, but to buy them through Flathead Electric.
Yes.
So there is a way around that you could work that into your. I'm just thinking it's possible to work that into your costs as you plan for that.
Yeah, it's something that's obviously moving forward and it's trending downward. What we want to do is make sure that we have the infrastructure for the development for them to be able to put that into the building, whoever wants to at that point. I don't think at this point from the development standpoint it makes sense to do that. But somebody that might buy one of these units, whether on the commercial or retail side of it, certainly might have a desire to do that, and they'd be able to do that at that point.
You mentioned the semantics of commercial versus retail. The emphasis in your proposal is clearly retail and not commercial. I'm looking at page 5 of 13 of your proposal, packet page 88. And then on packet page 89, it mentions retail. Page 91, you mentioned it's mentioned as retail. Packet page 93, or excuse me, 94, and that deals with finding number 8. It seems to me that why not just call it out as retail?
I'll be honest with you, I didn't know that this would be the hot topic item when we put the plans together and submitted it a couple months ago. So if I had known that, I would have certainly called out and coordinated the drawing on the first floor of the labeling exercise of the units as retail to be more congruent with the presentation that we put together for that. So I think that we all certainly want live edges. Why I switched that to there from retail to commercial as I move back in that labeling exercise, I really can't tell you. I don't think there was much of a discussion at that point. We were more concerned about having the smaller type units. We knew because of discussions with Dave that commercial was allowed on that floor. What we've seen is as units, and so the way this works is that in these buildings, the walls that kind of divide the building north-south there, between the units, where those are partition walls where they'd be able to be removed. The first 2 units, because of the stairway access off to the east side, the one in the corner, you kind of have to have it separated. The other ones up the front could certainly be joined all together as just one larger unit. What we've seen again is that the smaller units are easier able to sell. Also with the commercial, the retail want that street presence, okay? And if the retail unit wants to come in and buy the first unit or the first 2 units, whatever they want going this out, we're happy to do that. Those walls can be easily removed and they'd be able to get that whole space. They're not bearing in any sort of manner. All the trusses run north-south and bear on the corridor wall and then the outside wall. As such, what we've seen though is that as you move further into the building and you don't have that street presence, those retail spaces are not as economically viable. And as such, it was anticipated that more of a commercial or business use would be that. Now, certainly that commercial unit number 4, I believe there, my contacts are funny, or 3 can be certainly called out as retail and commercial 1 too. But it's just as it gets further off the street front, they just aren't used as much. And considering the fact that we're right next to State Farm and on a eye doctor office space right to the south of us, across the street originally was the law office at the Frank Lloyd Wright building. That mixed use in this block and with the church there is different than the rest of the retail frontage along that street. And as such, we've seen that, getting the retailers down this whole next block is the big challenge. This project and what's been going across the street certainly will help draw people further down this block, especially along that street front. But it's difficult to make them to turn even the side around on those other avenue streets at times. You just see the activity along that block. So again, if a retailer wants to use those units in the back or buy those other units, great. We're happy to have them buy those type of units. But it's just kind of what we've seen where the demand and where the usage really goes is that it tends to a little bit people that don't need that street presence as the building, hidden further back in the building. So we want to provide the flexibility so we don't have just a dead building.
The problem that we saw with the Fresh Life Church and their ideas for retail had no space for storage for anybody that had a retail business. I don't see any storage space, not that I'm trying to design the building.
Sure.
But the general size of it, once you have storage space, it really shrinks. And I understand about movable walls and all of that. So that's a concern. And the other is you show, and it's hard to say how you're going to do this, but you show only 2 restrooms on the first floor. And yet, I just don't understand how that works. I understand how restrooms work.
Right, exactly. Well, with mercantile, and it depends, and so typically what we've done in the other units, we haven't gone this far in the plans. So we do an occupant load calculation depending on the anticipated worst usage, which would be business and not commercial or market, because they have a higher, business is a higher use per occupant load to have a number of toilets and et cetera, formulas and one fun. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, so what we do is an occupant load calculation, and we then determine how a number of toilets we need if we're going to have a common set of toilets. I have not done that, and that will change, of course, now that we don't have residences on the back. So we do that. We might have to add another toilet or 2 in those common bathrooms. We then also plumb and identify locations where we would have individual toilets that could be plumbed to in the individual units themselves. We just plumb in the rough piping, water, sewer, to be able to get stuff in and out. If somebody wants to add in a toilet, private bathroom, or a sink or any sort of coffee bar thing or anything else, that you'd be able to do that at that point. Because of this building having a full garage underneath, we're going to have to handle plumbing and everything else like that, but it will be accessible from down below, being able to get up through that and put in plumbing where they need to for that first floor. But no, it's probably, if we're looking at it, it might be a toilet or 2 short. But mercantile is actually at a very, very high load of number of toilets you need, or very little toilets for a number of people. So.
Thanks. Melissa?
I'm just curious about, both of the retail spaces, neither one has a doorway directly onto the, you have to go in and then, so I don't know if that presents an issue or if a retail space came in that seemed like a good fit but wanted, to have an actual doorway directly onto the sidewalk. I don't know if that encourages more traffic into a store, but...
So a couple interesting things about that. We have some difficulties there. First off, the floor is raised 18 inches, so anytime we'd have an individual stairway or door, we'd have to have a stairway up to that. So it's a little bit trickier. Because of the floor construction, it's going to be difficult to cut into this multiple times. Second, by code, you cannot exit your door directly out onto the sidewalk. So anytime you have to do that, you have to actually have it exiting a recess in that wall system, and then you're exiting into a vestibule area inside or outside, and then out onto the street. So we'd have to create indentations for each one of these units. The second thing is we're playing kind of the fence here. We want people to come into this common space. If you take a look at it, the private residences accesses are all kind of going to be closed off, up on the second floor now specifically. But we want people to come in through a main corridor to kind of a common space, common corridor, that people will be able to walk in and go to these units and maybe see what's down the hall and move down towards that, versus just having one street front entrance for those type of units. So it's actually for either a business or retail use, we want to get to people to get inside the building and use it that way. It also helps with some thermal control and stuff like that, where people are walking in directly into a corridor, which can be temperature down, instead of directly into a unit where you use a lot of heat as soon as somebody opens the door, especially in these smaller type units. So we want to create we save some square footage by having one vestibule as part of the corridor versus each one having and losing heat that way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Aaron. We did call for a public hearing. Any members of the public? Now, the proponent, you're running short on time here, but.
I just want to speak real quick on the whole thing with the commercial versus retail. Bill Goldberg, 1240 Birch Point Drive. So the big reason why there was no real classification to that retail versus commercial was to leave as much flexibility as possible. What we've learned across the street on 309 Central and now into 317 Central, the original designs of those buildings, especially 309, we left large retail spaces, but left it open that it could be commercial. Had some interest in it, but it gets limited real quick because anybody considering commercial or office space or anything like that, there's no windows at all. So we had a number of tenants that were interested, but then when they see that there's no windows, it's dead before it starts. This building, setting it back that 5 feet on each side, allowed for us to have the windows to create more opportunity for somebody to have that option to say they would take a space because it's got natural light in the building. The other thing that we did in this one was to create smaller spaces. That was the number one thing we learned on 309. 1,700 square foot units were risky too big, and it took a while to get the commitment of those to come in for that space. We're learning on 317 of giving the option to go smaller individual spaces towards the interior of the building, albeit that they won't have the natural light with windows. We're getting more interest in it. Maybe it's a smaller space, which is a smaller lease. That could be the factor of the money side. But this one was just leaving it as open to, I guess, keeping our options open to take a retail or a commercial space was the main driver. So,
Thanks, Bill. Any members of the public wish to comment on this proposal? Now's your chance.
My name is Chris Schustrom, 504 Spokane Avenue. Quick question for the council to consider regarding their postponement. Where is this application in the time frame after which an application is automatically approved if the council does not take action?
It's my understanding that a decision has to be made by the 30th of December unless the proponent wishes to forego that option and chooses, which they apparently have done, to extend.
Will the city get that in writing?
Sure. I mean, it's in the public record
Okay,
now. Yeah,
thanks.
Yeah, it's in the public record.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. And then personal comment before I get into my formal comments here. I think the applicant's going to have a real problem moving that existing building based on recent experiences moving buildings around town. Be interesting to know what their intention is there. But thank you for the opportunity to comment on this application. As a board member of the Heart of Whitefish, I would like to express concern over aspects of the proposed development. It's important that the council address these issues, especially given the comments that you've just heard, where the applicant appears to be open to any kind of commercial development in this building. The adopted downtown Whitefish Business District Master Plan is very clear in stating that this block of Central Avenue must be developed as continuous edge-to-edge ground floor retail. The retail proposed on the ground floor of this project is not continuous edge-to-edge, front-to-back, side-to-side ground floor retail. This development does not meet the intent of the WB3 zoning for ground floor retail. The intent of the downtown master plan and WB3 zoning is clear regarding these requirements. This proposal includes less ground floor retail than the Fresh Life Church proposal that the council denied earlier this year. In finding number 13 of that denial, it states that it did not meet the intent of the WB3 zoning nor conform with the downtown master plan. It would seem appropriate that the council would be consistent with this recent decision as they consider this new conditional use permit, since the same issue exists here. The city has done an excellent job in completing a recent investment of over $1 million, including tax increment funds, to expand the retail core of this block of Central Avenue between 3rd and 4th Streets. The Central Avenue South Retail Anchor Block project was a priority catalyst project in the adopted downtown master plan. Page 62 of the plan states regarding this block, ground floor should be limited to retail uses exclusively. In order for the recently completed investment of TIF funds to provide the economic benefit to our downtown, the intended economic benefit to our downtown, redevelopment projects must meet the intent of the adopted plan and result in the intended expansion of ground floor retail. The adopted downtown master plan is also an adopted part of the Whitefish growth policy. It appears that allowing development of this type is exactly what has happened in other mountain towns, for example, Ketchum, Idaho, and that town has completely lost its character. And there are already a number of projects that have been built in Whitefish that are contributing to a move in that direction. Please do not approve this application until the issue of the lack of a continuous edge-to-edge ground floor retail is addressed in order for this redevelopment project to result in the intended economic benefit to this block of downtown. Please remember Whitefish Code 11-7-8 conditional use permits. The granting of a conditional use permit is a matter of grace, resting in the discretion of the City Council, and a refusal is not a denial of a right, conditional or otherwise. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Anyone else wish to speak on this proposal?
Good evening, Council. Rhonda Fitzgerald, 412 Lupfer Avenue. I just want to speak broadly about the downtown master plan. I was involved in every step of it, the original master plan adopted in 2005-2006, which was so successful in invigorating our town and attracting a lot of commercial investment. And the update of the downtown master plan, which was adopted in 2015, is the next step. And obviously, the purpose is to attract investment into our core. At the same time, it needs to be the right kind of investment. And it's very clear throughout the downtown master plan, right here, that this block of Central was meant to expand what's called our retail string. We had 3 blocks of retail use downtown, and this 4th block was called out in the plan as extending that commercial core. It's meant to have exactly the same aspects as the other 3 blocks north of it, and including ground floor retail. That is not that hard to understand. All of the land use framework maps throughout the plan show that block as retail ground floor, consistent with the 3 blocks north of it. It's very graphic, it's very clear. And the proposal you had in front of you earlier this year tried to overlook that, and you guys saw that that was inappropriate for the growth and health of our downtown. The same holds here. This ground floor should be retail. It can be 2 retail spaces, which, because it's a wide lot, or it could be 3. The traditional form on Central Avenue is 25-foot widths, 125 feet deep. Those businesses downtown do very well with that configuration. And you do need storage, and you do need officing in your retail business, and typically that goes to the back. The intent of the downtown master plan is very clear, and it has been adopted into the growth policy. I think the planning department has tried to make the point that they didn't update the code for this block, but this is a conditional use permit, so you're not really held to that. You can require that this be ground floor retail because it's consistent with the intent of your adopted plan. It appears to me that the applicant has demonstrated a fundamental misunderstanding of the intent of the plan. It's meant to be another downtown block. The buildings are not meant to have windows and balconies. Our downtown buildings do not have any space between them. And if the property to the north of this property redevelops, you've got a bunch of windows and balconies and things. We're asking builders to go lot line to lot line. And so all of this interest on the side is inappropriate. It's going to interfere with future redevelopment if someone chooses to do that on the next property. And I think that's very important to recognize that and not shoot yourself in the foot if someone else comes with another request. It's not that hard to build a building that's consistent with the character and fabric and historic rhythm of the buildings in the downtown core. This is the downtown core. This is not something different. It was not. That's why it's called out in the plan to invest TIF as a priority project in order to expand our retail. And it's meant to be community-serving retail. I'll read it to you. Under Overview, which is page 6, the plan fosters additional resident-serving retail, commercial, and housing units. So that brings me to the residential part of this. I realize that the short-term rental aspect is not something that we grappled with. We didn't see it coming, and I think it's something that council is going to have to address in the future. But the residential uses downtown that are built into this plan, I think it was up to 80 units was proposed in the framework, were meant for residential use, as in people live there. And the plan calls for vibrancy, year-round, 24-hour vibrancy. Short-term rentals are not vibrant. They are hollowed-out, dark buildings because we don't have a year-round visitor economy. We have a busy July and a busy August and a busy Christmas holiday. Otherwise, those buildings are empty. And the intent of the downtown master plan was to get people living in the commercial core so that they didn't have to drive to work. They could walk to the store, they could do their work and their living all within a perimeter that didn't require driving somewhere. And that's part of the climate action plan as well. So if we don't recognize that the housing that we're hoping to get downtown is meant for people who live and work in Whitefish, then we have a problem. Now, I'm not saying that is can be held against this particular application, but it's something that should certainly be considered. The plan calls for housing for people who live here of all income ranges, and it should include affordable housing. There's no affordable housing in this plan, even though everyone knows that you guys are working on an inclusionary zoning, and I really think that that should have been a component of this plan. It should be 2.5 units or something. If it's 20%, 3, if it's 25%, and that's another problem with the residential thing. From the Whitefish zoning definitions, residential purposes are the intent to use a room or group of rooms for living, sleeping, and housekeeping activities of persons on a permanent or semi-permanent basis of intended tenure of 1 month or more. That's the definition of residential. And so this is a very gray area with these short-term rentals. And I hope that you consider this, because we're going to have to grapple with it. We do want people living downtown, and if we keep building things that are not for people to live downtown, we will never get that. I think that's everything I wanted to say. I also made public comments at the planning board meeting, and I'm not going to repeat all of that part. But I do think that this points up the need for the city to review the role of short-term rentals in the downtown and how the current regulations do not encourage year-round residents. And I also have a little handout for you, which is a review of the called for steps in the downtown master plan update, which were to do a new overlay zone for downtown and to update the architectural review standards, because this particular project brings into sharp focus the fact that we needed to do this before. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. Anyone else wishing to speak on this proposal? Looking around the room, anyone else? That brings us back to where we started.
Deputy Mayor, I would like to move to postpone this matter to a date certain of January 7th at our next council meeting, and that we leave the public hearing open for that meeting at that time.
And is the public record absolutely clear that the proponent has agreed to extend the deadline for a decision until January 7th, or might be part of January 8th, looking at the way this goes?
I think it's clear, but maybe if Aaron could shoot me an email to that effect, or your client. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Does that meet the requirements? Okay.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
No.
All right. Well, let's vote. All those in favor? Okay. This will be continued. The public hearing will be continued as well until January 7th, maybe the 8th. Thank you all very much. That then brings us to our third public hearing. Oh, Bailey, I
It's me
was
again.
wondering if you were just hanging out just because you
Yeah,
enjoyed being here.
Oh,
so much.
yes, you know.
So this will be consideration of a request from Joy Curlian. Did I say that correctly or close?
I'm also not the best
Okay.
at pronouncing it,
For preliminary
unfortunately.
plat for 3 lots on 7.5 acres located at 465 Armory Road, Zone WCR, County Residential District, WPP. 18-10 is found on page 114 of your packet.
Okay, so the applicant is proposing a 3-lot residential subdivision on a total of 7.5 acres. The gross density of the subdivision is 0.4 dwelling units per acre. Each lot will be 2.5 acres in size. The lots will each have frontage and driveways along Armory Road, which is a county-maintained road. The subdivision will be required to provide a parkland cash in lieu dedication, and then there are no subdivision variances being requested. So I'll get a little more detailed here. The subject property, as I said, it's located at 465 Armory Road. It is currently has a single-family residence that is under construction on the Lot 3 of the subdivision. It is zoned WCR, which is our country residential district. It's surrounded by mostly counties, SAG 10 zoning to the north, the south, and the west, and then the city WCR to the east. North is the airport and the railroad. South and west are some residential uses, and then the east is currently vacant at this time. So we did mail a notice to the adjacent landowners within 300 feet of the parcel on October 23rd, since it's a major subdivision. We also placed a sign on the property, noticed advisory agencies, and we placed a legal in the pilot on October 31st. I had no comments that were received in writing. We did have a comment that was at planning board, and I'll get to that in a minute as well. But no written comments have been received up to this time. The fire marshal has reviewed the project, and he does have concerns on the overall length of the driveway for the flag lot, which is Lot 1, as it would be over 300 feet long, and additionally for Lot 3, depending on a future home location. As a condition of approval, we are recommending a note be placed on the face of the final plat that driveways for each lot must be constructed to a minimum travel surface width of 20 feet with a turnaround installed at the end that is compliant with current fire codes due to that overall length of the driveways. Additionally, the 20-feet surface must be maintained in all seasons to allow for emergency access, and the first 80 feet of the driveways must be paved, and then the remainder may be a suitable gravel surface. There is no internal subdivision road. As I mentioned, it's accessed off of Armory Road, which is a county-maintained road at this location. Driveway locations would be approved by the Public Works Department at the time of building permit applications. No frontage improvements are being required since it is still county-maintained, although the applicant will be required to pay cash in lieu of sidewalks along the entire frontage of Armory for any future redevelopment of the road when it does become city-maintained at a future date and is improved. Then we'll have the money to put sidewalks in. The proposed subdivision will generate approximately 30 total daily trips, so no traffic impact study was required, as it's less than our 200 trip threshold. There are no mapped crucial wildlife habitat. The lots do comply with the minimum 2.5 acre lot size for the WCR zoning, and these larger lots do allow the preservation of open space along these edges of town to help facilitate wildlife habitat and wildlife corridors. This area of town is also well known for having high groundwater. However, it does depend on property-specific locations. Groundwater monitoring was completed previously by a different firm, and the Public Works Department is aware that it does exist in that area. We are proposing a condition of approval that a note be placed on the face of the plat that basements or crawl spaces are not permitted, as it's assumed that groundwater is within 6 feet of the surface of the property. Each lot will be required to maintain stormwater on an individual basis. The location of the high groundwater may impact stormwater treatment plans, and so official plans would be completed by the Public Works Department at the time of future building permit is submitted. The property does propose to utilize individual wells on each lot. City water has not been extended this far down Armory Road. Currently, it ends at the intersection of Dodger Lane and Armory Road, which is approximately 1,700 feet from the southwest corner of this property. The DEQ and DNRC do have standards for new well construction and location, and they have to comply with those standards for the new wells. The project does propose to utilize the city sewer system. There's an existing sewer line along Armory Road that ends in about the middle of the subject property. The applicant will be required to extend the sewer main to the furthest edge of this property for any future connections to it. And then individual service lines will be extended to each lot. And all facilities will be designed and constructed to city standards. So as I mentioned, this location of Armory Road is a county-maintained paved public street. Since the city does not have jurisdiction over both sides of the road, it's not maintained by the city. City maintenance ends at Armory Park, which is approximately 550 feet away from the property. So therefore, no improvements are required or proposed at this time since it's in a joint jurisdiction. However, as I mentioned, the cash in lieu of sidewalks will be a requirement. The proposed subdivision is required to provide a parkland dedication. The lots do range between 1 acre and 3 acres in size, so they fall into our 5% of the net acreage of the property calculation, and that comes out to 15,496.47 square feet. That number may change if something happens and the lots change size or they reconfigure them, and so that would be looked at the time of final plat. Since the requirement is less than 1 acre in size, the Parks Board has determined they would prefer cash in lieu of parkland. It is adjacent to Armory Park as well. So. The property has historically been used for hay production. Imagery that I found on Google Earth shows it as early as the 1990s was the farthest earliest I could go on imagery, but as recent as 2017. Adjacent properties in the area have also been used similarly, and some are still in current production. Recent growth within town and Whitefish has been pushing new development further to the edges of town and converting agricultural land to residential development. We are recommending a condition that a note be placed on the face of the plat indicating the presence of agricultural uses in this area and that a homeowner should be aware that those predate the subdivision. The growth policy does identify the parcels as rural residential on our future land use map, and the WCR zoning does comply with that designation, and the proposed lots do comply with the WCR zoning. So staff recommended approval of the application dated November 8th, subject to 14 conditions. The planning board met on November 15th and considered the request. The applicant's representative was present at the meeting. He's also present this evening to answer any questions. I did pass out at the planning board an updated water availability, water quality report that was submitted after the planning board packets went out. It was included in your packet this evening as one of my additional exhibits for you. There additionally was one member of the public that commented at the public hearing in opposition to the proposal, and those draft minutes were attached for your packet. Following the hearing, the planning planning board did vote 6-1 to recommend approval of the application to you this evening. And I'm happy to answer questions, or as I said, Eric's here as well if you have questions for him. So,
Frank?
Bailey, is there going to be right-of-way dedicated to the sidewalk at a future date?
Your mic, Frank.
Did you hear my question?
I heard your question. Yeah. As far as I know, right now, no additional right-of-way is being requested or proposed. I believe the right-of-way at this location is already at 60 feet, if I'm not mistaken with it. Currently, their property, they do have, it's like an easement. The way the county works is it's not actual right-of-way, it's just an easement on top of that. But I do believe it is already at 60 feet. So.
Your microphone, too?
Jake has to do.
Oh, Jake
Craig's
has
talking.
to do.
Oh. Craig.
There is enough dedicated easement currently to construct that sidewalk.
Thanks.
We'll just start yelling at Jake, in the back.
Yeah. This one's going to be for Travis, Jake. Where's Travis? Oh, there you are. We just recently approved a minor subdivision on Colorado, and one of the requirements was that if one of the structures was more than, I think it was 150 feet from a hydrant, it had to be sprinkled. It seems to me any structures here are going to be at some distance from the nearest hydrant or from a source of water, and I don't remember what the well logs said in terms of gallons per minute, but would you be recommending, in other words, should we add a condition or be thinking about a condition requiring sprinkling?
Typically what I do is if they can't provide a turnaround or access to the property, then yes, we'd require it to be sprinkled. But this case, they have plenty of room to provide a fire turnaround. And typically, our hydrant spacings are 300 feet apart, is what we typically do. I don't think it needs to be sprinkled, but I do think it has to have a fire turnaround at the end of it there, so we can actually get in there and get out.
And you had that as a condition, yes.
Yeah, I actually put it in two places. I put it as a separate condition. Hold on a second. Condition number 9 is specifically addressing that, and then I also added it in condition 12, which is the notes on the face of the plat. It's on I guess it'd be page 118 of your packet. It's like the second page of conditions, right before condition 13. It's the last note to be placed on the face. So I put it in 2 spots, so it's obvious that that's the standard.
Is there any conflict with and I don't know who controls the airstrip anymore, whether it's the FAA, whether it's the county, or is there any conflict there?
I did have, on a separate proposal, I did have it was MDT that actually commented. They got my agency referral notice and for once called us, yay. And he didn't have any comments on it, so they were just wondering what was going on, but they didn't have any comments. So.
Okay, great, thanks. Anyone else have questions for Bailey? All right, thanks, Bailey. We did call for a public hearing on WPP 18-10. Anyone in the public wishing to speak on this? I'm sorry, it's the proponent's turn first. Eric, good to see you. Thank you.
I can be public or proponent. My name's Eric Mulcahy, 2 Village Loop, Sand Surveying. I'm representing the applicants. We concur with the staff report by staff. We also concur with the conditions that were proposed. We would not be in favor of a condition for sprinkling because there is a new house on one of those lots that was just recently, or is recently being finished, and it would be pretty difficult to retrofit that for sprinkling. So we would not be in favor of a new condition, but the condition for the driveway width and turnaround we're completely fine with.
Okay. Remind me, is all of this going to be paved, all the road extension and the driveway? First 80 feet. Okay, right. Got it. Okay. Thanks. Anything else, Eric? Anybody have a question for Eric? No? You're off. Now, anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular proposal? Looking around, I don't see anybody, just jumping right up. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to council.
I would move to approve WPPP. I'm already on.
Oh, you're on?
I'm already
Okay.
on. WPPP 18-10, findings of fact in the staff report and the 14 conditions of approval as approved by the Whitefish Planning Board on November 15th, 2018.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor Sweeney, seconded by Councilor Hartman to approve WPP 18-10. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And Michelle, it does pass unanimously. That brings us on to our final resolution and public hearing for this evening. It's Resolution 18-45?
45?
Yes, 18-45, a resolution extending the corporate limits of the city of Whitefish to annex approximately 22 acres of contiguous land, and that's found on page 196 of your packet. And we'll start, just let me get to 196, and is this you, Angie?
It is.
All right, have at it.
All right, good evening, Deputy Mayor and City Council members. My staff report begins on page 205 of the packet. And by a little bit way of history, back in 1989, the Park Knoll Water Association requested that the city extend our water services to their subdivision, and the city agreed to do so, conditioned upon the property owners waiving the right to protest annexation when Park Knoll ultimately became contiguous to city limits. Park Knoll has been contiguous to city limits for several years, and the city has been providing water service to Park Knoll for over 30 years. Back in November, on November 5th of 2018, the City Council passed a resolution of intent to annex Park Knoll, which is the first step in the annexation process. We published notice twice as required by law, and we sent property owners letters indicating what we were intending on doing, which is also required by law. And we gave property owners 20 days from publication of the first notice in order to file written protests. But as I indicated earlier, when Park Knoll was allowed to attach to city water, the property owners were required to waive their right to protest, which is common what we do when we want to provide service to a group, but we're not ready to annex them, or they're not annexable, I guess, if that's a word. So we did not receive any written comments. We did, prior to the meeting at which we passed the resolution of intention to annex, we did receive one comment, but during the protest period, we didn't receive any written protests. So I will speak to the one comment that we received back in November. There was some concern that somehow annexing Park Knoll would make Park Knoll Lane our road, a city road. That is actually not accurate. Annexing just means we're bringing property within city limits. It doesn't mean that it is our property. There are several subdivisions and developments within the city that have private roads, but are actually within city limits, and Grouse Mountain is an example of one of those, where the roads are privately owned and maintained, but the subdivision itself is actually within city limits. So regardless of the method we use to annex, we have to have an extension of services plan, which we do have, and our extension of services plan itself requires that the resolution of annexation set forth the basically our plan for bringing the subdivision up to our current standards, and our resolution in front of you does that. So if council decides to annex Park Knoll, it's estimated that the city will collect an additional $7,367 in property taxes and assessments, and that's based upon the fiscal year 17 tax rate. So staff does respectfully recommend that the council approve the resolution and bring Park Knoll within city limits. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Angie? No? All right, thanks, Angie. We called for a public hearing this evening on this matter. Is there anyone in the public wishing to respond? And again, your name and address for the record.
Karen Giese, Park Knoll, 121 Park Knoll Lane.
I'm sorry, your name again?
Karen Giese.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. The frog hit. I want to thank the city for almost 30 years of water service up at Park Knoll. It has made our subdivision a great place to be because of that. I wasn't there, we were not living there when the wells went out, but the city graciously extended the services to us, and for that we've been very appreciative, so thank you very much. One of the advantages of coming into the city will we won't be paying quite as high water rates as we are now, so yay. I was not able to be at the previous meeting on November 5th, and I'm just kind of wondering what the time frame is for all of this to take place in.
Angie, I think normally we don't take questions, but I think this is worth answering.
I'm just curious.
No. I think it's important that you have an answer because I need the answer as well.
Okay.
So, Angie, can you help us?
And I guess if you're asking, like, when will you actually be in city limits?
Yeah, just approximately what the time frame is for this whole process.
Sure. So actually, the way resolution or annexations work is we do, a notice of intent, and then we do the actual resolution annexing you. So if it were to pass city council tonight, you would be in city limits.
Immediately?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Just curious how that all works. So again, I'm not up here to complain or anything. Look forward to being part of the city and continue to participate in all of the everything that's going on here. And again, thank you so much for the water that's been extended to us, and we'll continue working with Craig Workman on other issues that we have to deal with. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Karen. Anyone else wish to speak on this proposal? Taking another look around, not seeing anyone wishing to speak, we'll turn it back to council for comment and or a motion.
I would move to, go ahead.
Oh, it's okay.
Carry on.
I'll move to approve resolution number 18-45, a resolution extending the corporate limits of the city of Whitefish to annex approximately 22 acres of contiguous land.
And I'll second.
It's been moved by Councilor Hartman, seconded by Councilor Sweeney to approve resolution 18-45, a resolution extending the corporate limits of the city of Whitefish to annex approximately 22 acres of contiguous land, as found on page 196 and subject to the staff report on page 205 and 6. Comments? All those in favor? And it passes unanimously. Michelle, thank you very much for your comments. Really appreciate those. Thanks so much tonight. That moves us on to communications from the Public Works Director, Craig. That'll be Mr. Workman. Jake?
I think I'm still good.
Oh, okay. Hot mic.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. Obviously, this is the moment on the agenda that everyone's been waiting for, so we can talk about wastewater. So this is, I think, what I've characterized in the past as the single largest project that the Public Works Department in Whitefish will take on, and this is really an important step in moving us forward in that the design effort for the new wastewater treatment plant. My staff report begins on page 208, and I'll kind of go through the cliff notes of that as quickly as I can. In 2016, a preliminary engineering report was approved by City Council recommending that a mechanical wastewater treatment facility be constructed in the location of our existing wastewater lagoons. The type of treatment plant that was selected in that preliminary engineering report was called a sequencing batch reactor, or SBR. This is a type of mechanical wastewater treatment plant where multiple processes can happen within the same basin, and so these types of treatment plants really do save space and save cost. Several SBR systems have been built throughout the state of Montana, and they've proven very effective and advantageous for wastewater treatment. So generally, when selecting an SBR, what we'll do is we'll go through a bidding process where different SBR manufacturers will bid on the project. We'll then select the manufacturer, and that will allow us to move forward with the design efforts for the wastewater plant. So that's where we are right now. The first equipment bid that we held was late last summer in August, and we actually got 6 bids. Unfortunately, upon review of the bids, there were some pretty significant errors that were made on the part of just about every one of the bidders. And so with Angie's help, we did decide to reject that first round of bids, and we went out for bids again. The second round of bids was opened in mid-September, and we actually picked up a bidder. We got 7 this time, so we felt like rejecting the bids and re-advertising actually was a successful method, and we did get a really good response. So we went through the bids, did some evaluations, primarily looking at capital costs, operational costs, concrete and foundation costs, experience of the bidders, the warranties that were offered with the bids, and then references and ongoing support. And we selected two bidders to go through and interview. Those 2 interviewees were Sanitaire, which is a process or a company based, both companies are American-made. Sanitaire, I believe, is based out of Wisconsin, and Aqua Aerobic is based out of the Chicago area, out of Rockford. The bid for the Sanitaire system was $1.098 million. However, they had several adders that we would have to add to their base bid in order to get the process that we'd like. Aqua Aerobic's bid was for $2.366 million with no necessary additions. I should mention that the Aqua Aerobic system is called the Aqua Nerita. I like to call it the Aqua Nerd. And we'll talk more about that later on in my staff report. While the Nerita equipment was definitely larger or more significant, the bid cost was significantly greater than Sanitary. The interesting factor with the Nerita system is it's a much smaller basin, which makes for a significant reduction in construction cost in the overall footprint. So consequently, after factoring in concrete, foundation, and all of the construction expenses, the Nerita was actually significantly less in overall cost. In addition, the operational costs for the Nerita system are projected to be much less than the Sanitaire system, primarily due to energy conservation. So at the end of the day, the Nerita system was estimated to be about $1.3 million less in capital and about $1.7 million less in net present worth, which takes into consideration all the operational costs. While the cost differences definitely support the Nerita system, the process this company is proposing is new to the U.S. And it utilizes a type of activated sludge that a process that's recently evolved and become or shown to be very effective in treating wastewater. A public-private partnership in the Netherlands actually led to the development of this process, which is called aerobic granular sludge, or AGS. Currently, mostly in Europe, there's about 30 full-scale Nerita plants. They have been constructed over 5 continents, and several are actually now under construction in the United States. The oldest plant is actually in the Netherlands. It's a Dutch plant. It's about 10 years old, and it's proven to be very effective in wastewater treatment. In September of 2016, Aqua Aerobic was the American company that brought this technology to the U.S. And so the process is proprietary to Aqua Aerobic, and there's some pretty significant user agreements that are required in order to move forward with this. We've spent the last several months, well, since I guess about mid-September or mid-October, roughly the last 2 months, going through the different agreements. Angie, I appreciate all of your effort in that. But we feel like the company has really come a long way and helped reduce the risk to the city and made us feel much more comfortable with this technology. We've been favorably impressed with the company, Aqua Aerobic that is, and they're standing behind this. In wastewater treatment systems, most of the typical treatment process is found by converting organic matter in the raw wastewater into a stable, what we call biomass, or the sludge. And what's really fascinating by this aerobic granular sludge is the rate at which it settles out. And I've included a really spectacular picture in your staff report kind of showing how standard wastewater sludge settles compared to this aerobic granular sludge. Look at that. That is not a dark stout beer. That is actually wastewater through the treatment process. So the picture, or the vial on the left is after a 5-minute settling time with the aerobic granular sludge, so you can see how effective it really is at growing that biomass. In more practical terms, the Narita system will allow us to build a much smaller plant, a much more cost-effective plant, and a much more efficient plant. And so that is the option that I'll be recommending that we move forward with. The total estimated capital costs for the wastewater plant, as shown in our capital improvement plan and carried forward from the rate study that we completed a couple years ago, is $18.4 million. This plant actually will bring us a couple $1 million under that cost, I'm hoping. So including that 18.4 includes construction, engineering, administration, and about a 15% contingency. So as I discussed previously, the Narita system with the reduced footprint and the operational efficiencies, we feel is going to be about $1.68 million in total net present worth, a reduction of $1.68 million in overall net present worth. So after several discussions with Aqua Aerobic, we really do feel this is a quality company. They've come a long way, and they've worked really hard to get our business and to work with us on these agreements. We've had conversations with several references throughout the world, in fact, on this AGS process, and we really feel that it's a capable technology that'll help reach a high level of wastewater treatment. And so one more thing I'd note is that this will be the first AGS, or aerobic granular sludge system, in Montana. And so Aqua Aerobic has already begun discussions with the Montana DEQ about the process, and those have gone well. DEQ has indicated their general support. Long story short, the Public Works Department is recommending that Council award the wastewater treatment plant improvement project equipment procurement to Aqua Aerobic Systems in the amount of $2.365911 million. There you have it. That motion is at the very end of my staff report, which I believe is on page 211 of your packet.
Any questions for Craig? Frank?
Craig, is this system going to be one that is what I'll call expandable by unit? In other words, you say it's going to be a smaller footprint and more efficient. I get that. I like all of those things. Is this a system that also can be added on to at a reasonable cost?
Yes. One of the primary drivers to the SBR system, or the sequencing batch system that we picked back when we did the preliminary engineering report, is the ability to add on or to expand We're still showing this as a 3-basin SBR, but we could easily add additional basins down the road. The beauty of it is the future basins will be just as small as the ones that we'll be building this time, so expansion costs, while possible, will also be reduced.
Right answer. Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes, Melissa.
I'm just curious, was there any significant difference as far as with the different bidders, the actual, quality of the product, the water quality when it's, I don't know if that was...
Yeah, with the specifications that we wrote for the equipment procurement, we required that the vendors guarantee a certain performance in water quality, specifically in reduction of nitrogen, phosphorus, and ammonia. And so each of the bidders did have to follow that same performance guarantee. The difference in the bids was the type of equipment, the different blowers and mixers and pumps, where we saw a fairly wide variety of quality. We felt that Sanitaire and Aqua Aerobic provided the highest quality equipment, and so that's why they were selected for the interview. So these guys in the Narita system really do have the top-of-the-line equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? In terms of energy consumption, one of the things that we talked about extensively in the Climate Action Plan was the energy costs or consumption of a new wastewater treatment plant. And how does this fit with some of the analysis that was done with the Climate Action Plan?
Actually just had, ironically, Karin and Sophia are in Colorado right now meeting with the folks at NREL, talking about mostly the solar array and the different options that we're looking at. I don't have it right in front of me, but this plant, in round numbers, was about 15% more efficient than what we anticipated in the original solar feasibility study. And so it really does a good job. And primarily that's based on the reduction in footprint and the reduction in amount of water and amount of air that's required to treat the water. But we think that from a climate action perspective, this is definitely the top-rated plant to go with.
Okay. And what about, because one of the things I think we've been working on, somebody's been working on anyway, is a site plan for that entire area. What effect, if any, will this decision, should we make it tonight, have on that site plan, or are we just still so early days in that site plan that it really doesn't make any difference? I see Adam shaking his head. You want to weigh in, Adam?
Yeah, we are just very preliminary when we're getting into beginning the stages of planning that. So, and I think one of the things that we wanted to to kind of wait out too was some of the footprint that's needed by a wastewater treatment facility and of course expansion. So we want to make sure that there's enough there for the coming decades before we start planning stuff around it. So we are in the preliminary stages, but we hope by next spring to have a little outline of what we want to do.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, just to add to that, one thing I will mention is the previous engineering designs for this wastewater plant from a site plan perspective showed the SBR basins going in we refer to as cell 3 in the lagoon network. Based on the footprint of the Narita system, we actually think that we can pull the basins out of that cell 3 and open that up for future land use, whether it be, tree farming or composting or other, potential needs for that site. So, long story short, the reduction in basin size is significant enough that I think it will kind of drive that site plan and help us out down the road.
Great, thanks. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll need a motion.
We'll move to award the wastewater treatment plant improvement project equipment procurement to Aqua Aerobic Systems, Inc. in the amount not to exceed $2,365,911.
I will second.
It's been moved by Councilor Sweeney, seconded by Councilor Williams to approve the resolution, the award of the wastewater treatment equipment to Aqua Systems. Comments? Last chance. No further comment? Then, all those in favor? And once again, it passes unanimously. Michelle. That brings us then to communications from the city manager, and his written report enclosed with a packet. Any questions, any comments you want to add, Adam?
You know, I think the only thing is I just want to, again, thank Al Stinson, the Whitefish Housing Authority, Homeward, City Council, staff, everyone that worked so hard on the low-income housing tax credits. I think that was a huge win for the city. I do believe that there's kind of a feeling out there that Whitefish is rich, therefore we don't need any help in this arena, and that is not the case. We tried to convey that to the Montana Board of Housing, and I think it was heard. We made it by one vote the other way, and we would have been done. So, you know, there is still some opposition, but I think some of that might be more of support for the communities that those board members are from. More than an overall feeling, you know, for or against Whitefish. But it was great that we were to get these. I want to make sure and point out that this is the value of the tax credits before they are sold in the open market. So in the open market, they've been getting about 88 cents on the dollar. So you could see us realize about $6 million of these tax credits. So what's going to be about an $8.7 to $9 million project, $6 million is covered by tax credits. There's going to have to be $3 million made up through this process, but Homeward is pretty much in the driver's seat at this point moving forward. I know they've secured an architect and are moving forward in that regard, and I believe they're going to start building in spring or early summer, so this could be really exciting. So we're excited about that. Other than that, we have a housing steering committee next Thursday, and hopefully we'll have some more updates from inclusionary zoning. We're continuing to work on deed restrictions, working with developers, lenders, trying to wrap up some of the little things that are still causing a few people a little angst out there. I know there's still a general feeling that you can't find lenders. That's not what we're finding. So, but we're trying to make sure that our deed restrictions match what is needed in the lending world. So,
okay, great, thanks. Other items rising between 28th and December 3rd. Anything else in there?
Nope.
No. All right. Well, then that brings us to communications from the mayor and city councilors, starting at the far end of the dais with Melissa.
Adam, thank you for helping this project along, the tax credits, and Katie, who's served on the committee, and everyone else who helped with that process. That's super exciting news for Whitefish, so thank you guys.
Frank?
Just happy holidays and opening the mountain to all.
All right. Katie?
Yes, Adam, you were absent at the last meeting, and we got a nod from every counselor. I think we spoke about this briefly, to pursue an interlocal meeting in Whitefish on the fourth Monday of January, which I do believe is the 28th. And I am beyond strapped, and I feel as though it would be more appropriate if you could reach out to all of the city managers and their appropriate council, including the county commissioners. Phil Mitchell was the county commissioner who took who took the lead on stating that they'd be interested in said interlocal meeting. And so the original purpose for this meeting is for the 911 Communication Center interlocal agreement, which was never signed after we went through and edited it and actually updated it to its current operation procedures, but there was a little headwind. Wow, my brain's done talking today. Anyway, long story short, it never got signed. Kalispell didn't want to get on board, and we kind of had a little hitch in our giddy up. So ideally, what we'd like to talk about is rectifying every single municipality to sign the interlocal agreement, and then we'll also have a potential funding proposal for the 911 center, hopefully by then, if I can get all of my ducks in a row. So if you could please reach out to everyone, and we could hopefully facilitate that here on that 28th would be wonderful.
I'll reach out to them.
Thank you so much. And happy ski season, everyone.
All right. Couple of things. This is for council members present and absent, and any staff members who might have some free time. It's that time once again to ring the bells for the Salvation Army Christmas Kettle Bell. It says we're going to be at Safeway this year and not Food Depot. Is that correct? So I'm looking for volunteers anytime on a 1-hour basis, so you can sign up for 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 hours. Starting at 10 o'clock on December 13th until 6 o'clock on the same day. So I'll pass this along to folks to sign up, and then I'll share it with you, Michelle, and we'll see what we can do to fill that. This is for those of you, you're the only one who hasn't had this opportunity yet, Melissa, and this is our chance to ring the bells, and there's something of a competition between the various communities to who raises the most money. So everybody will have ringing in their ears, ringing of joy, I'm sure. So feel free to sign up as you go. Secondly, Craig, I warned you about this before the meeting began, and that is, would you once again, for the viewing and listening public's pleasure, describe, and maybe Chief Dial could also weigh in on this. So Jake, Chief Dial, and Craig, if you could bring them online, to talk about where to park and when for snow removal. That began actually October 1st.
Correct. Alternate side parking went into effect October 1st, and it will be in effect through the month of April. The intention is that from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. every single day during alternate side parking season, you park on the even side of the road on the even days and the odd side of the road on the odd days. So that's 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. even side, odd side. Typically, the even sides of the road in Whitefish are the north and west. The odd sides are the south and east. I say typically because there are some roads that may not be addressed that way, but that's going to cover you about 90% of the time, I would say. The ordinance does not include roads that have other existing parking regulations. For example, if a road is permanently no parking one side or the other, alternate side parking does not apply on that road. All of the downtown, for example, is no parking from 2:30 a.m. until 6 a.m., or I think it's 2:30 to 6 a.m. Alternate side parking does not apply downtown. It's only on the roads that don't have other parking restrictions. So, for example, right now it's 9:15 on December 3rd. Alternate side parking will go into effect at 5 a.m. tomorrow. So if your car is not on the even side of the road right now, you've got 7 hours and 45 minutes to move it.
Okay. Chief Dial, I noticed some of your folks were out and about putting stickers on windows this week, or last week maybe. And did you receive any feedback on those stickers? I mean, has anybody called into City Hall saying, hey, why did I get this sticker? Or what's
No.
Any reaction? Any reaction from the public at all?
No.
Really? Amazing. Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to add, Chief? No. Okay. And then one last thing. It is snow season, and not only with parking, but I want to encourage everyone to look out for your neighbors. We all have neighbors, I think, who are perhaps less able to shovel their walks, and so I encourage everyone to reach out and help your neighbor as you possibly can. And I too wish happy holidays for everyone. And we will next see each other in a formal setting next year, January 7th, right here at City Hall Chambers. Happy holidays, everyone. We are adjourned.